What up? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And look at you. You done stumbled upon little OTB Saints, where we bring you all the latest black and gold coverage.
Who are the Saints going to draft? Who's going to be their quarterback? What does the salary cap look like? All that information and more.
Hope you enjoy it. Like, subscribe.
Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast. You could follow him on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. Ross, it's been a while, man. How you doing? Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, man, for sure. No, absolutely a pleasure. Good morning to you, man, and thanks so much for having me on. Looking forward to chopping it up with you.
Yes, sir. Always enjoyed doing so. Before we get to the football, talk to me about the heat, man. Apparently, it's been very intense out there. They're only going to be spending an hour outside going forward due to the heat. Fans will still get to see team drills at least, but the early part of practice will be inside, closed to fans. You guys will still get to be out there, but from somebody who's actually experiencing not just the heat, but the humidity down there in Metairie, what has it been like? Is it really this bad?
Yeah, it's toasty, man. It's toasty out there. Yeah, I think yesterday in particular was kind of the toughest day out of all of them thus far. But we're also standing on the sidelines, no helmets, no pads, not running around, everything like that. I can't imagine what the players must be going through. Especially they're also wearing those guardian caps across multiple positions now as well. So I'm sure that only adds to the heat. So, it's a good call by the Saints organization to put in some, precautions in place to keep everybody healthy, keep everybody safe, especially with the hot weather that's supposed to persist here over the course of the next week.
Got you. Stay hydrated, man. That's going to be really important.
Man.
That's going to be really important next couple of days. Kind of going off the wall here for my first football question. I saw the Madden ratings come out yesterday, and the Saints posted about their top 5 rated players. And, you don't want to put too much stock into Madden ratings, although I'm sure the evaluators do a really good job and they do their homework. But the highest rated Madden player on the Saints was a name that I did not expect, and that's Tyron Matthew. He has a 91 overall rating, and in my head, that's a little bit surprising. Now, I thought Tyron finished the season last year a lot better than he started. I think he is in the right place a lot of the time when fans don't see, and he's a big part of this football team. But from someone like you who's been at practices now going into this season, what did you think of Tyron's work last year, his first year in New Orleans? And what do you think his role is going to look like this year as kind of a veteran leader and now some more experience in this secondary?
Yeah, I think Tyron deserves the rating that he got, and I think that it's one of the few ratings that they actually got right. I mean, they barely even get the rosters right on that game these days, but when it comes down to the ratings, who knows? But I do think that Tyron played a great brand of safety last year. He was asked to be in the box a ton. He was asked to play deep a ton. So he had that versatile role that Dennis Allen wanted him to be able to play. Tyron was able to play, and Tyron was the one guy in the secondary that was able to play all throughout the season and was completely available to the team all throughout. So not only did he have to sort of get a grasp of what the scheme was, what was being asked of him, but he also had to do with a rotating cast of characters around him throughout the entire season, whether that's in corner, center. Me switching the Pelicans talk real quick. But corner and safety, as well as, of course, in the slot. And so I think when you consider that and you consider the Saints' ability to take away the big play later on in the season, he was a part of a defense that allowed only no more than 20 points per game over the course of the last 8 games of the year. I think you really saw him turn the corner. You saw him get more comfortable, and I think you're seeing even better brand of that right now throughout training camp as he's a little bit more comfortable in the system with another year in training camp getting under his belt.
Like to hear it. Ross Jackson is our guest, host of the Locked On Saints podcast. You could follow him on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. We usually ask about Jake Haener later on in the interview, but I know you talked about him a little bit on your pod yesterday. You're really excited about some of the stuff he's doing. Obviously, probably not going to play this year, given disaster doesn't happen with the injuries in the quarterback room. But what do you make of Jake Haener so far, and how would you describe his progress on his first NFL team?
Yeah, I mean, the guy looks like he's been playing football, playing in the NFL for the past couple of years. I'd say the same thing about Kendre Miller. Both of them just look to have adjusted to the NFL speed a lot faster than you would imagine. Now, that doesn't mean that the Saints should be entertaining turning the ball over to, Jake Haener as the starter or anything crazy like that. But I do think that it has a lot of value. And a guy like Jake Haener ends up having a lot of value for your offense even if he never sees the field in 2023, which ideally, as you mentioned, from the injury perspective, you hope he doesn't. And the reason why I think he still brings you a lot of value is that the Saints have kind of thrown the first team, second team, third team convention out of the window here over the course of training camp. You're watching guys like Chris Olave and Rasheed Shaheed take these snaps with second and third teams. You're watching Michael Thomas taking snaps with second teams. You're watching, guys like Brian Edwards and James Washington, A.T. Perry, Lynn Bowden. These guys are taking snaps with teams 1 through 3. And so I think that when you consider that, you want to make sure that if those guys are taking all of those snaps, if the Saints are rotating a bunch of different players to get a look at them, you want to make sure they're still getting valuable snaps when they are getting those 13 reps, and that they're not taking those reps off because there's a quarterback that can't get the ball to them. Or last year, or the past couple of years in the Ian Book situations where the quarterback just looked to run more than he looked to pass. And I think that right now you've got guys in Derek Carr, Jameis Winston, and now Jake Haener who can all deliver NFL throws all over the field. And I think that carries a lot of value for your roster, 1 through, let's call it 87, right, not including the 3 quarterbacks. And then that translates to your practice over the course of the weeks after your 53-man roster is established. Sure, your practice squad members are getting good work in with a good quarterback, and if they continue to rotate players, they end up getting work no matter which quarterback is throwing them the football. That's a really unique situation to be in if you're a skill position player.
Speaking of skill position players, I've heard Rasheed Shaheed has had a great camp from a lot of our guests. They have kind of brought him up unprompted, including Holden Mayo, who came on the show on Monday. He said he looked like the best player on the field at times, and this is somebody who really shined as an undrafted rookie, 488 yards, 2 touchdowns, lots of big plays after being undrafted from Weber State, also known as the Fighting Damian Lillards. But Rasheed is going to have a bigger role this year. How would you describe that role, and how would you describe how he's looked at camp so far?
Yeah, I think he's looked really solid in camp so far, and that goes all the way back to OTAs and minicamp where he was also impressing. I think he's becoming a little bit more subtle as a route runner, which I think is, kind of his next step for sure. You know that he can be a kick returner. You know that he can make those big catches, but he's becoming a little bit more of a 3-level threat, a guy that's going to be able to sell that vertical push, which defensive backs have to take seriously. They have to honor the fact that he has such incredible deep speed. Otherwise, they're going to get lost in the dust by the time that he runs that 9 route. And so because of that, it forces him to do things like commit to that vertical release a little bit earlier, flip their hips a little bit earlier, which then gives him the leverage for underneath cuts, things like that. So I think you're going to watch him develop into a lot more of a weapon in the receiving game. And I wouldn't be surprised to still see him utilized in ways like, jet sweeps, reverses, and running routes out of the backfield and all these other kind of multiple things that they can do with him. He's far more than a gadget guy. He's far more than just a take the top off the defense guy. He'll be a real offensive weapon here in 2023.
That's exciting. Pete Carmichael can do a lot with that, hopefully, and now with Derek Carr at the helm. Since we're talking wide receivers, how does Mike Thomas look so far? The important thing is he's healthy, he's participating in full, but somebody who hasn't played a lot of football the last 3 years will have to get himself into football shape, right? How would you describe how Mike looks out there?
Yeah, and I would say that exactly that is still in progress, right? Like when he's out there and he's got the opportunity to be able to get going, he's going to, kind of go 110% and make sure that, he's giving his all the way throughout. But then you look at kind of where the rest of this all is in terms of where's his, furthered along progress and everything. And that is going to take a little bit of time. And so I think that, you're still watching him kind of figure that part of his game out and get, kind of back up to speed. But he's got a bigger chip on his shoulder than ever before, as he often describes. And he's a guy that's supremely confident in his talents, and rightfully so. And I don't think it's going to be very long before he's fully back to kind of the Michael Thomas that we're accustomed to seeing, and how, he's going to be able to pull it all together. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch over the course of training camp. But, that's not to say that he hasn't already looked good. He's off to a great start, but he's certainly on a progress-based process with the New Orleans Saints, who are kind of trying to make sure that he is taking his time getting back to, being full, not necessarily full go, but, working his way back up to 100% as opposed to just trying to, leap there as quickly as possible.
For sure. Got to take your time there. And you have a lot more depth at wide receiver this year, so that bodes well for Mike. Alvin Kamara got his meeting with Roger Goodell, Ross. We'll see if that affects the length suspension he gets. But where are you at on Alvin Kamara? You don't have to speculate and guess how many games he'll be suspended if you don't want to. But Do you think any good will come out of this meeting with Goodell, and do you think we'll at least get an answer soon?
Yeah, I think that there's a chance that there's two things. This really can only help Alvin Kamara because he's obviously not going to go in there with anything that's going to further a case against them, right? So it can really only help him. And then the other piece of it is that you're kind of watching to see when are we going to get the news about what's going to happen with Alvin Kamara, what suspension he has, if any, here in 2023. Maybe this actually helps to further along that process, or gives Roger Goodell and whoever that committee is going to be that's looking at Alvin Kamara's case more information that potentially leads to the investigation, the NFL's investigation, taking a longer time. So we're going to get some clarity hopefully around this pretty soon, but we'll see how this meeting goes between Kamara and Roger Goodell. But I do think that it's a unique thing that Alvin Kamara is doing. It's uniquely Alvin Kamara to take kind of the situation into his own hands. And, I would still expect him to see a multi-game suspension here in 2023 just based on, video evidence of the altercation. Although Alvin Kamara is probably going to be looking to provide context to that, because what we don't know is what happened before. We don't have any audio, all that kind of stuff. And then the other thing that you're kind of looking at here is that this did happen during an NFL-sanctioned event with the Pro Bowl. There was a reason that Alvin Kamara was in Vegas. And so maybe that, has some weight to it. So I would still expect a multi-game suspension, but I'm down from the 6 games that I expected per the NFL Code of Conduct policy when that was a felony charge that was dropped down to a misdemeanor in Vegas. So I do think that right now what Alvin Kamara is doing potentially helps to reduce that number in terms of how many games he sees whenever that suspension happens.
Wow, just amazing black and gold takes right there, Jake.
I don't think I've ever heard any takes that are better than the 2 guys that just gave you that take.
And you can keep getting them by going ahead and liking, subscribing, ringing the bell to get notifications when we post. Have a great day. We'll see you on the next OTB Saints.